So the book's called Hungry, the Stars and Everything, and it's out this week. It's available in the foyer, just down there at a store with the Hidden Gem Press. I just thought I'd read the beginning because then it wouldn't need, hopefully wouldn't need any introduction. I was 11 years old when I realised what I wanted most out of life. More. This epiphany came at around 3 a.m. on Christmas Eve 1991. I checked my too tight cartoon wristwatch, a present from my brother, bought by my mother 2 Christmases ago, and then I silently made my way downstairs, holding my breath and stepping on the outer edges of the stairs to avoid the creaks. In the living room, the fake fairy-lit tree stood between the open curtains of the front window, and what seemed like 100 presents were heaped beneath it. I instantly recognised the shape of the gift-wrapped chocolate bar, my father's annual present from my grandmother, and sat down beside it, cross-legged in my pyjamas. I'd made my decision earlier that evening. I was going to eat it. To put it simply, I was fed up of being good. It felt as though everywhere I went, school, church, even sitting around the dinner table, I was being judged by everyone around me, mostly by teachers and parents, but sometimes other children too. It was as though I always had to be on my guard, always watching what I said, how I stood or used my fork. The scrutiny was almost unbearable. I jumped at a sudden scuffle from the dining room, and then I remembered the hamsters. The day we broke up for the holidays, I'd been granted temporary custody of 2 trembling, gingery hamsters, Mac and Beth, who usually lived in a cage in my form classroom. Because I'd been well behaved, and also because we didn't have a cat at the time, the teacher had allowed me to take the hamsters home to look after them while the school was empty over Christmas. I'd initially put the cage in my bedroom, but 2 days later, Mac and Beth had been demoted to the dining room because my mother couldn't take the incessant racket in the early hours, what with her nerves. But Mac and Beth's nocturnal bedlam had given me an idea. Unless you spent a night with the hamsters, you had no idea of the havoc they could wreak. By day they looked so sweet and innocent, but then, as night fell, they morphed into little monsters, shredding their beds, breaking their toys, gnawing at the bars of their cage in a bid to escape. Aha, I thought to myself. I'd got so bored of smiling through the chores over this particular Christmas that I decided I'd try being bad for a change. Very bad indeed. My father's present was wrapped in gold paper, decorated with little white asterisks, the same paper Grandma had used to wrap all of our presents. There was no bow to contend with, just a few mandatory strips of rippled sticky tape. Grandma prided herself on her unfussy approach to Christmas, along with her unfussy approach to everything else. Each layer of the present came away like an old skin being shed, until the chocolate lay bare in my hands. I looked at it for a moment, appreciating its size and shape and colour. As I took a bite, the bar snapped, leaving a jagged chocolate claw in my hand. Children aren't supposed to like dark chocolate. It's one of those bitter things that you're meant to acquire for a taste for later in life, like olives and self-pity. But I was different. I enjoyed the taste of wrongness in my mouth, the sheer devilment of what I was doing. After I'd eaten a whole bar, I sucked each finger, wiped my mouth, and licked the side of my hand where more wet chocolate had gathered. Then I cocked my head to one side while I composed my thoughts. It wasn't as sweet as the chocolate I'd had before, but it was interesting. It tasted like metal, dirty water, soil, the makings of a new world. I stood up by the tree, and as I was batting splinters of chocolate from the legs of my pyjama pants, something caught my attention through the window. Halfway down the driveway I could see a ghoulish green light spinning up and down. It seemed to gather speed as it dropped, and then just as it looked as if it would hit the ground, it was pulled sharply upwards. The light would flicker, and then it descended again. I strained to see what it was, utterly mesmerised. It had been snowing on and off a lot throughout that December, so as the green light dropped low, the white powdery ground glowed peppermint, and then as it whipped up again, the light momentarily illuminated the outline of a figure, the bottom corner of a trouser leg, a cat's eye cufflink, a jacket tail. I could see that the figure was that of a young man, and the light beside him was coming from a glow-in-the-dark yo-yo. As the steady stream of light from the yo-yo continued to rise and fall, I saw more details: a pinstripe suit, a stiff white shirt, a hat with a band of ribbon round it, a tie with a knot that looked too wide. The man was dressed like one of the Rat Pack singers my grandmother had been cursing that very evening. "Womanising gangsters," she said, as Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin and Perry Como had larked about on the swing music showcase I'd insisted on watching. "Look at their evil little shark eyes." This man was dressed like those singers, but he didn't look like a womanising gangster to me. He looked suave and sophisticated, like someone I would want to know. And then I noticed something else. Where the man's shirt cuffs ended, I saw flashes of red skin, burnt and sore-looking, like my mother's fingers where she picked them round the nails. I looked up to his face and saw that it was heart-shaped with sharp cheekbones, and his lips were impishly lopsided. Finally, either side of his trilby hat, two red horns protruded, their rude silhouettes spiking thornily against the moonlit sky. I blinked, and he was still standing there. I blinked a second time, and when I saw him there still, I felt a wide smile spread slowly across my face. There he was, for real, and as gorgeous as anything. There, among the constellations of the tree lights reflected in the window pane, the monstrous privets, the looming rhododendrons, the dark, the night, the great beyond. The devil himself was leaning against my mother's freshly waxed Austin Maestro, playing with a yo-yo on a string. I stayed still and quiet until finally he looked up, and we locked eyes, and I felt a strange feeling in my stomach, as if my guts were yawning open. I didn't want to look away, but when I felt my right palm prickle, I unclenched my hand to see the birthmark there, pink and straggly as a lace of raspberry licorice, stretching from the base of my middle finger to the bottom of my palm. I'd been teased about the birthmark at school, and had scratched it until it had bled, trying to remove it, desperate to be the same as everybody else. My grandmother hadn't helped. The one and only time I'd let her read my palm, she'd recoiled, exclaiming, "Look at that monstrosity, right over your lifeline. I can't imagine that's a good omen." Now the birthmark glowed like a crack in hot coal. I looked up again and felt the voltage shoot between my eyes and his, and I realised I was totally unafraid. More than that, I was interested. He waved at me and tipped his hat. "Pleased to meet you," I whispered, and the sound of my voice fluttered around the quiet room. I chose to forget all the times my grandmother had told me that the devil was involved in terrible things. The details, the deep blue sea, rock and roll. I stood there, thunderstruck in my pyjamas, and I felt my mouth stretch into a wide grin. Then, in a puff of thick grey smoke, he disappeared. I ran to the window and pressed my palm against the icy pane, straining to see him on the street, at the corner, anywhere, but he disappeared without a trace, and the world opened up again into a dull, excluding place. I ran out of the room to the front door and turned the key in the lock as quickly as I could, but when I opened the door, all I was greeted by was a blast of snow-scented air. I felt bereft, as though something tempting had been offered to me and then snatched away. I lingered, hoping that he would reappear, and then as I looked down, I saw the yo-yo lying lifeless on the doorstep. I bent down and picked it up, passing it between my hands, loving its coolness and roundness. I looked up one last time into the hollow night, and then I closed the door and made my way up to bed. That's it, thank you.